Since the shooting last month at a high school in Parkland, Florida, the profile of the long national debate over guns has changed dramatically. The case for the right to bear arms has been challenged by another force, a campaign for the right to public safety led by students who are survivors of violence. That campaign, known as the March for Our Lives, will be in the forefront Saturday with events in many cities around the world, including Boston. Joining us tonight is a longtime advocate of stronger gun controls, the co-founder and executive director of Stop Handgun Violence, John Rosenthal. Thank you very much for being with us again, John.
Thanks for having me back.
So I want to start with the name of your organization and use that to put this all into perspective. You know, we've had all this attention to the big guns killing, large numbers of people, and you're concerned about handguns.
Right. So in 1994, the late Michael Kennedy and I started Stop Handgun Violence. When we became aware that 106 Americans died every single day and roughly 300 were shot every day. And the majority of gun deaths and injuries are from handguns. All the mass shootings are with large capacity ammunition magazines greater than law enforcement carries. So the law enforcement who are even, stationed at schools are outgunned by kids with assault weapons and large capacity ammunition magazines. So yeah, we started Stop Handgun Violence because the majority of gun violence at the time and still is handgun violence.
Is there a way to reduce access to those handguns in Massachusetts without being too restrictive for people who use guns in a legitimate way?
Absolutely. So, Chris, as you know, I'm a gun owner, have been my whole adult life. I have no interest in banning all guns, but I am convinced that the founders never intended the Second Amendment to protect assault weapons and people to buy guns who are prohibited, dangerously mentally ill, criminals, and even international terrorists that come to this country to buy guns in 30 states and at thousands of gun shows where there's no background check requirement. So Massachusetts has simply passed laws and regulations since 1994 that hold gun owners like me, gun dealers, gun manufacturers, and law enforcement accountable. We've reduced the rate of gun deaths by 40% since 1994, and urban Massachusetts now has the lowest gun death rate in the nation. And the only thing that we ban are military-style assault weapons, the common denominator in all these mass shootings, the large-capacity ammunition magazine, bump stocks like were used in Las Vegas. I mean, 550 people shot within minutes, 58 dead, and a total of 851 people injured. And Massachusetts was the only state in the nation that put a ban on bump stocks that turn a semi-automatic weapon into a fully automatic weapon. So Massachusetts is the model for gun violence prevention. We've proven the NRA's worst nightmare, that gun laws save lives, but 2/3 of all gun crime that happens in Massachusetts still happens with guns that are purchased out of state. In Maine, New Hampshire, Vermont, Florida, and Georgia are the primary crime gun source states here in Massachusetts. So imagine if we were able to get the whole country to enact the common sense gun laws that Massachusetts has done. That 40% reduction in gun deaths would be probably 95% reduction in gun deaths rate. So finally, after Parkland, the students and others are starting to look at urban Massachusetts as the model for gun violence prevention. So we're providing resources to everyone that asks.
This has been in news, and we're talking with John Rosenthal from Stop Handgun Violence. John, what about the change that's going on with students out front? I mean, the message coming from survivors. Talk about how much difference that makes.
It is a bit of a game changer, but it's not unprecedented. I mean, it was students that stopped this, that initiated the civil rights movement. It was students that stopped the war in Vietnam. It was students that started the divestiture from South Africa. So I am very hopeful now. Finally, students are stepping up in the absence of adults doing the right thing. I mean, it's just incredible that we now live in a nation, and we have for decades, where it is dangerous to go to school, it's dangerous to go to public places, and it's dangerous in many, many, many urban neighborhoods because of unrestricted access to firearms. And adults aren't using it as a voting issue, and members of Congress can get away with murder. They are literally choosing, because look, we're the only country that does this. I mean, after every mass shooting, we hear you can't, that gun laws are illegal according to the Second Amendment, that it's not the gun, it's the mentally ill, that gun laws don't work. Well, guess what? Massachusetts has proven that the NRA is lying on all 3 counts. The Second Amendment has been decided by the Supreme Court. It says you can't ban guns in the common use of the time of the founders, and Justice Scalia in 2008 wrote for the majority, and I am not talking about sawed-off shotguns or assault weapons. They didn't exist. So you can put reasonable restrictions on how guns are sold. Assault weapons are not protected, and you can have background checks and other requirements for the commercial sale of guns. Every country has mentally ill people. No other country arms them with assault weapons. So what's different is kids are finally calling adults out, and they're taking control of themselves.
I know there are a lot of students in Boston who might say that they're less worried about a mass shooter with an AR-15 coming in than, just somebody with a handgun and a bad attitude. What should a student make of that situation as far as trying to improve things and make it safer?
Sure. So 95% of gun violence every day. There's 300 people shot a day today. 100 will die. The majority are handguns. All the mass shootings are with large capacity ammunition magazines and assault weapons. So if you want to reduce the majority of gun violence, simply have a background check for all gun sales in every state, a point of purchase transaction. Let police chiefs who know their residents. Most of the gun violence that happens, which is handgun violence, happens among people that know each other. 2/3 are suicides. So have police chiefs have the discretion, like they have in Massachusetts, to issue licenses like we do for automobiles, and have it be renewable every 6 years in case your mental condition changes. And if you want to stop the mass shootings, which are happening with large capacity ammunition magazines and assault weapons, simply ban them like we have done here in Massachusetts. And ultimately, I would take it a step further. I would do what Australia did. They had a mass shooting with an AR-15 assault rifle, killed 35 people. They banned the weapons and they bought them back. So you no longer can even own a military-style assault weapon in the country of Australia. And guess what? They haven't had a mass shooting since.
What about how much of a role these restrictions can help have in reducing crime? I mean, you mentioned that handgun violence is down in the last 20 years or so, but couldn't there be other factors responsible for that as well, whether it's better policing, demographics changing?
Look, the common denominator in gun violence is the gun. So we have federal gun policy is to provide unrestricted access to firearms without a background check or detection by law enforcement. That is federal gun laws. Massachusetts and several other states have enacted tougher gun laws which have withstood the test of time, reduced gun injuries and deaths without inflicting or conflicting with the Second Amendment. So if our gun policies federally were to follow the lead of Massachusetts versus follow the lead of the NRA, and having unrestricted access to guns, instead having accountability and the responsibility on the part of gun owners, dealers, manufacturers, and law enforcement without banning anything other than assault weapons, and putting consumer protection standards on firearms, like toy guns are regulated, but real guns are not, except here in Massachusetts, we would reduce the majority of gun crime, suicides, and accidents without banning anything other than assault weapons. But you just have to, truth is stranger than fiction, Chris. When you come down to it, it is federal gun policy to allow unrestricted access to guns without detection by law enforcement. So in Massachusetts, we give law enforcement tools, and they have to license people, and they have discretion in licensing. And as a result, we've had a big impact on reducing injuries and deaths. But as long as any criminal in Massachusetts can drive across the border into Maine, New Hampshire, and Vermont and buy an unlimited number of guns without a background check or detection from private gun dealers, we're never going to be able to reduce crime like we should.
I should mention, John, you have both a website and an active Twitter feed, so if people want to check that out, what's the best way to look at it?
So go to stophandgunviolence.org, and just today we launched a Stop Handgun Violence student advocacy toolkit. So not only does it tell you who your elected officials are, but it also provides videos on how to rebut the NRA lies around the Second Amendment, mental illness, and whether or not gun laws work.
Thank you very much for being with us.
My pleasure.
John Rosenthal from Stop Handgun Violence.